It doesn't matter what background you have when you become a governor. I think it's important that governors embrace the role and gain an understanding of the NHS and how it works and how the trust works so that they can ask the right questions. I'm not a native of South Yorkshire, as you'll hear from my accent as we go through this, but I've lived here for 30 years. And I've always worked in healthcare, either as a provider or a supplier to healthcare, to the NHS, passionate about the NHS. So 10 years ago, I decided to run for governor, voluntary role. It was really important for me to try and give something back. Still involved in healthcare now as a managing director of a healthcare group, and I see from both sides how the NHS is working. So I think that gives me a bit more of an insight in my role as lead governor.
Yeah, that perspective is important. So tell us a little bit about the role of governor then, Gavin. Sort of what does a governor do? What's their contribution to the NHS?
Really, the public governors are there to represent the members of the public and the members of the trust, the foundation trust, and represent their interests. They're there to ask questions and try to improve really the way the trust works. It's even more important at the moment within the new system. We're also there to hold the non-executives, directors, to account for their role in keeping the board accountable for running the hospital. That's a really important role. There's some other statutory roles. For example, if the trust was going to spend up to 5% of its budget on any one single acquisition, that would have to come to the governors. And I think most importantly, we're responsible ultimately for the appointment of non-executive directors, including the chairman. And we've just recently ratified the appointment of our substantive chief executive. It doesn't matter what background you have when you become a governor. I think it's important that governors embrace the role and gain an understanding of the NHS and how it works and how the trust works so that they can ask the right questions. I think historically, governors, as you just said, Dan, we're from lots of different backgrounds, usually more mature and usually retired. And I think that's changing now as younger people in that demographic who are still actively employed are becoming more interested in healthcare and helping. That's changing. That's important. And I think the other thing that's changing is, and I've hopefully helped with this a little bit, is educating governors so that they understand how the healthcare system works.
So what do you think is the most important thing about being a governor in terms of how the trust operates, what we're able to achieve?
Yeah, I think it is in that holding the non-executive directors to account and making sure that they are doing their job properly, because ultimately they are there to make sure the board and the leadership of the hospital is doing the right thing. And I think one of the things I've tried to do is bring the non-executive directors and the governors a bit closer together so that we as governors understand their role a little bit more, understand them as people, understand what motivates them, so that we can help them achieve their goals. I think the other thing as well is having a very good, well-established pool of staff governors, because they represent the people who work here. And there are thousands of people who work here. We've got 5 staff governors. And I've also instituted a kind of a dialogue between them and the leadership, which I think is really key as well. So from the staff side, it's making sure we have good staff governors who are able to help their constituency. And then from the public governor side, making sure we do that role properly, which is making sure we speak to the non-executive directors and ask the right questions and hold them to account for their role.
Is there something you're particularly most proud of in the 9 years or so that you've been a governor, Gavin?
I think probably if I had to pick one thing, it would be the slow change in terms of the governor demographic and also the understanding of how things work, really, gaining an understanding of how finances flow, of the roles of the important roles within the trust, both clinically and non-clinically, and also I think bringing the non-executives and the governors closer together through regular meetings. An example of that would be we have a non-executive director who attends our forum once a quarter, just to talk about themselves and what they do and how they work, and them as people and also their role within the trust. So hopefully, if there was going to be a legacy from my tenure, it would be those things, really. We're in a new system, a new way of delivering healthcare, and it's important that Rotherham, both the place and the trust, don't get swallowed up in that, and that the people of Rotherham don't get the healthcare they deserve. So my hope for the future is that the people of Rotherham get the best healthcare available within the area, within the locality, and that the trust continues to grow and work in collaboration and not competition with the other trusts in the area. I think the first thing is to make sure that, and this happens a lot now, that where governors hear or see things not happening the way they should, that it's raised and talked about and discussed. And I think the other thing, as well as governors, is we lobby to make sure we're part of the system. And I think particularly in our trust, the chairman and the chief executive have made sure that that's happened. So for example, we've recently had a meeting with the chief executive and the chairman of the ICB, where their objectives and their goals for the system and for the future of healthcare in South Yorkshire were laid out. And the other important thing I'd add is that we're now also responsible for making sure that our non-executive directors play a broader part across the system. So not just in the trust, but we hold them to account for their roles outside of the hospital. And that's a key component that what didn't exist before.
Gavin, do you want to tell us a little bit about what makes a good governor then?
Yeah, I think having an interest, first of all, an interest in healthcare, an interest in improving healthcare. That was always my passion, even when I had other roles. I think also having a passion, and it could be a single item, a single thing that you're passionate about within the NHS that starts that drive. And ultimately a willingness to learn, because there's a lot to learn about the healthcare system, about the NHS. What we see on the news and what we read in the papers isn't the NHS. And so I think often governors come in and are surprised by that. But I think ultimately it's the interest. It's the interest and the passion, really. Anyone can make a difference. So any one person. And I'll give you an example. So we had a governor who's sadly passed away now, whose main focus was on improving the meals for inpatients. And over the years, almost single-handedly, really, he dragged the trust into that. There was a lot of support for that, but it was the single biggest item on his agenda. And I would say that, he had a real impact. What we've been able to do is bring in non-executive directors of equal stature, and that is our role. That is, that's one of the key components of a governor's role.
Off the top of your head, so what professional backgrounds do the non-executive directors come from that you've been able to bring into the trust?
Well, just recently we've brought in 2 non-executive directors, one of whom was a director of nursing in the past, and is now the chief executive of a hospice in Derbyshire, and has got all of the right skills that we need from a clinical non-executive director's perspective. And we've just brought in someone who was the chair of Sheffield University as well, and has just recently left his role as non-executive director of Sheffield Teaching Hospitals, and in the past has held very high-level executive roles, chief executive roles, and he will add a lot of gravitas, I think, to the non-executive director team. I think from my perspective, and I think I said it earlier, I think if you have a passion for improving healthcare, or if you have had experience, good and bad, of being a user of the NHS or working in the NHS, or have worked in the NHS, then, and I think in general terms, if you are someone who has Rotherham at your core, then I would urge some people to stand to as a governor. The governors have a very important role in representing the members of the public, the members of the trust, and also in the actual running of the trust as well.